Hey everyone! So in this video I'm going to go over the homework items that you need to complete here in week 3. So the first thing you'll see listed under the week 3 homework assignments tab are the chapter readings for this week. And there's quite a few listed. But I don't really want to say that you have to read them. This week, as you know, was really all about, sentence sense and revising your writing on a sentence level. So looking at grammar and mechanics and looking at revising sentences for, to improve the style of your writing. So these chapters really are just an add-on to the material in the week 3 module. If you went through the handouts and then possibly watched the videos in each one, you might not need to even look at these chapters. If you do better understanding things when you read them in a book, then you might want to give these chapters a look over. But they really are just more a lot of examples. So that could be helpful, but there's not a lot of reading per se. Those chapters are there as just an additional, just a supplement to the material in the week 3 module. So read them, look them over if you want. The next item you'll see listed is, of course, the week 3 journal. So for this week, I want you to list 3 things you look for in a good shopping experience. It can be anything from grocery shopping to clothing shopping to car shopping, whatever. Just think of a specific type of shopping experience and list 3 things that you look for that make it a good experience. So you might consider criteria such as friendly service, variety of products to choose from, the frequency of their sales and deals, maybe their hours, maybe it could be, just even little things like how much parking there is, or, how well stocked they are, those sorts of things. So just think of a specific type of shopping experience. Could be grocery shopping, or maybe you're going to go with like clothing shopping. Whatever the case is, choose a specific type of shopping experience and just list the 3 things you look for that make it a good experience for you. You only need to list those 3 things. What you're actually going to write about then is choosing a specific store or location and explaining how that location, how that store does or does not measure up in those 3 areas you listed. So if you chose, grocery shopping as your type of shopping experience, list 3 things you look for to make it a good shopping experience. What needs to happen in order for you to feel like it was a good shopping experience? List those 3 things, and then in the paragraph, in your actual response that you're going to type up, pick a specific grocery store, like Kroger or Meijer or Aldi, and explain how that specific location measures up in those 3 things you listed. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's a horrible place to shop. I don't know. But try to type nonstop for 8 to 10 minutes. Get as many ideas down as you can, even if you start to go off topic. But again, make sure that you're only listing the 3 things you look for, and then focus on one specific location. Okay? Alright. The next item you'll see listed is week 3 assignment 1, which is on fragments and run-ons. So this was the first 2 lessons listed under the grammar and mechanics subtab. So if you are not familiar with sentence fragments or run-on sentences and comma splices, you need to go back and review those 2 lessons. At least look at the handouts that are, what's there on the screen. If you read through that and you're still not sure, then maybe watch the videos as well. But these are the 2 most common grammatical errors in writing. So it's very important that you learn what they are, how to identify them, and how to fix them, right? I will be looking for these types of errors when I grade your formal writing assignments. So you want to make sure you get a good understanding of them now, so that way you don't have to worry about fixing them when you work on those formal paragraphs. All right, so part 1 is on sentence fragments. And what you're going to see, there are 3 sets of sentences. 1, 2, 3. Each set has a sentence fragment present in it. Your first job is to identify which one is the sentence fragment and either highlight it or underline it, just like I have done in the example there in the box. Right? So an electric eel can produce a shock of over 600 volts, more than enough power to kill a full-grown human. The eel uses this power as radar to find live food. The sentence fragment, the one that looks like a full sentence but is actually an incomplete sentence, is the middle one. So I highlighted it. You can highlight or underline. But that's your first job. Step 1, underline or highlight the sentence fragment. Your next job, step 2, is to make the correction. And I've given you an example of that as well. So we saw where the sentence fragment was in the example, and now I'm showing you how to fix it. An electric eel can produce a shock of over 600 volts, comma, more than enough power to kill a full-grown human. The eel uses this power as radar to find live food. So that's what you're going to do for each of the 3 sets listed below that box. 1, 2, 3. Your first job for question 1, highlight or underline the fragment, and then underneath that set, type out your correction. Same thing for 2 and 3. There is a fragment in each set. There is only one fragment in each set, and there are no other errors in the sets. The only problem is there is a fragment. One fragment in each set, that's it. Find it, highlight it or underline it, and then underneath the set, make the correction. Okay? Part 2 is on run-on sentences and comma splices. So we learned that a run-on sentence is when you have 2 or more complete sentences jammed together with either no punctuation separating them or incorrect punctuation separating them. One way that it could be incorrect punctuation separating them is if you have just a comma by itself trying to separate those 2 complete sentences. That is called a comma splice. It's still a run-on sentence. We just give that type a special name because it's so common. It is the most common error in all of writing. You cannot connect 2 complete sentences with just a comma. The comma by itself is not strong enough. If this is news to you, please go back through that lesson in the week 3 module. Because, again, this is the most common error, and I will be looking for it. Okay? So what you're going to do in this assignment is there are 7 sets underneath the example boxes. Every one of them contains some type of run-on sentence. It might be a sort of traditional run-on sentence where one sentence just goes right into the second one, or it might be a comma splice where there's only a comma separating the 2. Your job is to figure out where the run-on problem is and fix it. So in the first example, I show you a straight traditional run-on sentence. Fear can prevent a person from acting. Hate, on the other hand, will often cause action. The problem is between the words acting and hate. The first sentence ends after the word acting, and the second sentence begins with the word hate, but they just bleed right into each other. So, in this case, I used a semicolon to connect them. Fear can prevent a person from acting, semicolon. Hate, on the other hand, will often cause action. A semicolon is strong enough to connect two complete sentences, but a comma is not, right? There are other ways that we could have fixed this, and I go through those different ways, those different methods in the lesson in week 3. But in this particular example, I chose to use the semicolon. The next example, I show you a comma splice. I got a speeding ticket last week. The cost of my insurance will probably go up. We have two complete sentences here. I got a speeding ticket last week. The cost of my insurance will probably go up. We only have a comma separating them, though. That is not correct. The comma by itself is not strong enough. We can, however, use a comma if we use a coordinating conjunction with it. I got a speeding ticket last week, comma, so the cost of my insurance will probably go up. Again, there are other ways we could have fixed this problem. But because the comma was already there, I decided to add a coordinating conjunction so that it would then be correct. So again, very common errors. If you're looking at these examples and you're not quite sure why they're wrong or how to fix them properly, go back through the lesson. Not only do I explain it in the lesson, but then there are sample exercises at the bottom, and then underneath the sample exercises are the answers. And then of course the video lesson goes through all of that in detail. So your job though, once you're pretty confident that you understand what's going on here, is in those 7 sets, find out where the run-on sentence is. And again, it might be a traditional run-on where they bleed right into each other, or it might be a comma splice. Find it, and underneath, type out a correction for it. So that is it for week 3 assignment 1. This will be done as a text submission, so you will need to copy and paste the exercise into the text box underneath the instructions and mark your answers in the text box. You can copy and paste the whole thing, or you can just copy and paste the questions, if you will. So 1, 2, and 3 in part 1, and 1 through 7 for part 2. I don't care. As long as it's clear to me that these are the sentence fragments, answers, and these are the run-on and comma splices answers, right? The next assignment this week is week 3 assignment 2, revising for style. So we looked at those 2 very common, grammar and mechanical errors with fragments and run-ons, but we also looked at some other things that aren't really about errors. They're really more about just adding more style, improving the style of your writing, making it sound better, making it clearer for the reader, right? So we looked at how to eliminate ineffective writing. We looked at how to make sure we have solid modifiers, and we looked at how to, combine our sentences to have more variety and more complex thoughts in our writing. So that's what this assignment is going to cover. So part 1 is about cliches. And if you're not sure what a cliche is, again, go back to the lesson in the week 3 module. Once you're confident that you understand what cliches and clutter words are, clutter words was also in the lesson, then what you're going to do for this part is look at this paragraph about this trip to Nashville, Tennessee, and you are going to either highlight or underline any cliches or clutter words you find. But don't just go marking things willy-nilly. Don't go underlining or highlighting anything. Make sure that it's truly a cliche. Make sure that it's truly a clutter word, right? There's at least 20 things that could be, I think there's actually close to 30, that could be highlighted or underlined in this one paragraph. So you shouldn't have a problem being able to find at least 10. Okay. Part 2 is on modifiers. So in the lesson we looked at misplaced modifiers and dangling modifiers. So in this part you have 8 sentences, and each one of them has a faulty modifier. It is either a misplaced modifier, meaning it's just in the wrong part of the sentence, or it's a dangling modifier. And again, if you are not sure what either of those are, go back to the lesson. Once you are confident that you understand this lesson on modifiers, what you're going to do for this part is correct the modifier error. So I've given you 2 examples here. So in the original of the first example, it says, they bought a puppy for my sister they called Fido. If you notice what I have in bold there, my sister they called Fido. The way that sentence is structured, it makes it seem like Fido is the name of the sister. But we know that's not right. We know Fido is the name of the puppy. Well, if that's the case, then Fido needs to come closest to the thing it modifies, puppy. So, they bought a puppy they called Fido for my sister. You could have done it, you could have said, they bought my sister a puppy named Fido, or called Fido. You can rearrange it in a different way. But make sure that it's clear that it's the puppy who's called Fido and not the sister. So that was an example of a misplaced modifier. It just was not in the correct part of the sentence. Example number 2 is an example of a dangling modifier. So the original sentence says, unsure of where to go, the map came in handy. The modifying phrase is there at the beginning. Unsure of where to go. We need to know what that's modifying. Who was unsure of where to go? Right now it seems like the map, because that's what comes immediately after that modifier. But the map isn't unsure of where to go. The map can't be unsure of where to go. The person or people who are unsure of where to go aren't even in the sentence. So we have to add them in. Since we were unsure of where to go, the map came in handy. And again, there are several ways you could have fixed that. But just remember that a dangling modifier, the noun that that phrase is modifying, isn't actually present in the sentence. We forgot to add them in. Can we understand what is meant by these sentences? Probably. But why take the risk that your reader might misunderstand? So work on those 8 sentences and figure out where the modifier error is. I've put parts of the sentences in bold to draw your attention to where the problem is. So for each one, figure out what the problem is, and then underneath, type out a correction, just like the examples did. And then part 3 is all about sentence combining. So what you're going to do here, we have 3 sets of sentences. And each set needs to be combined into one single grammatically correct sentence. Now, you only need to take the main ideas from each sentence, right? And if you go back to the lesson in the module, there are a lot of examples of how to do this as well. But you're not taking each full sentence and trying to combine it all. You're just taking the main ideas, the most important details from each sentence, and putting it all together into one single grammatically correct sentence. So there's an example here for you. The original set of sentences, there were 3. Oscar the Grouch is a character on Sesame Street. He is green and grouchy. He lives in a trash can. So one way that we could take all the main ideas out of those 3 sentences and put them into one is there in the example box. Oscar the Grouch is a green and grouchy character on Sesame Street who lives in a trash can. Right, so when I went to combine them, I left a bunch of small words out, a bunch of prepositions and things like that aren't needed anymore because they're not complete sentences now. I just took the main ideas from each sentence and put them all together into one single grammatically correct sentence. You're going to do the same thing for those 3 sets. Again, don't leave anything out. Make sure you get all the main ideas from every single sentence into your version. Make sure that it's only one sentence. And make sure it's grammatically correct, which means make sure you don't have any run-ons or comma splices. Alright, this will be done as a text submission assignment, so again, you'll have to copy and paste everything into the text box, and, you know, mark your answers that way. Again, you can copy and paste the whole darn thing if you want, if that's easier for you, or you can just copy and paste the paragraph for part 1, copy and paste 1 through 8 in part 2, and then just copy and paste the 3 sets of sentences in part 3, however it works best for you. But just make sure that I can tell these are your answers for part 1, these are your answers for part 2, and these are your answers for part 3. And again, all of those, all 3 parts, if you struggle with any of them, go back to the lesson in the week 3 module. And then of course the last item for homework this week is the week 3 discussion, and the topic for this week is life then versus life now. So I want you to think about how much life has changed since you were a child. And I want you to discuss at least 3 similarities and or differences between life then and life now. You can choose to look at, you know, things that are actually personal to you, like you personally, what's different about your life when you were a kid versus your life now. Or you can kind of talk about life in general, you know, things that all of us would relate to. How was life in general back then versus how life is in general right now. So you can go from either way, right? If you want to make it more personal, you can do that. If you want to make it more general, you can do that. Either way you go, though, think of at least 3 similarities or 3 differences and discuss those, right? You want a paragraph of probably 10 to 12 sentences because you're probably going to need, you know, at least 2 or 3 sentences for each similarity or difference that you look at, okay? And try to be specific, you know, don't just say life as a kid was more fun, but life now is much harder. What do you mean by fun, right? Give specific examples. What do you mean by now life is much harder? Be specific, okay? That's how you'll get those 10 to 12 sentences for a paragraph, giving specific examples. But try to focus on just 3 or maybe 4 similarities or differences, and just give us specific examples of each one. Try to have your first post up by Thursday night, and don't forget to respond to 2 classmates before the discussion closes Sunday night. If you have any questions about any of this week's homework, or if you run into any technical difficulties with this week's homework, feel free to let me know. I will do whatever I can to try to help. If you have questions about the specific, you know, tasks that you have to do in each assignment, especially week 3 assignment 1 and week 3 assignment 2, I do suggest go through the lesson first. And then if you still have questions and don't understand what you're supposed to do for that assignment, then reach out to me and I will give you additional support. Okay? But if there's any way I can help with anything else, reach out to me and I'll do my best. Otherwise, good luck on everything, and I can't wait to read your discussion posts.